Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, really, depending where you are in the world. But it's good to see so many of you back for the first of our Zoom meetings of the 2024-25 season. I think we've got 10 good displays for you this year, and it's an absolute delight to welcome a relatively new member of the Royal, Adrian Pearson, to give us a fascinating insight into the Crimean War. It's the first of two parts, and the second part will be later on in the season. I think Adrian's he studied ancient history, and I think his first passion perhaps was really coins. So it's good to see that postal history has also got his interest going, and I'm sure he's going to delight us with that interest. So with that, Adrian, over to you.
So it's in the postal history of the Crimean War. So we're going to cover short introduction and background, postage arrangements for the forces in the East and what was on the envelopes. And this time we'll be mainly concentrating on from what they call the army in the East. So that's Turkey, the Balkans and the Crimea, and concentrate on the British Army. So Crimean War was the Russian Empire on one side and Turkey, Britain, France, and later Sardinia on the other side, and Austria sort of in the middle, which kept neutral but had an influence. Turkey declared war on Russia after its fleet was sunk. Russians invaded Turkey, and Britain and France sent their fleets and their armies out to the east. But by the time the British and French armies had got to the Balkans to help defend Turkey, Turkey had driven the Russians out themselves. So they then had to decide what to do with the armies that they brought out there. So because the Russians had got a powerful fleet in the Black Sea and had destroyed part of the Turkish fleet at Sinope, they decided to neutralize the Russian naval base at Sevastopol. And so 14th of September 1854, they sailed to the Crimea. They landed at a place called Kalamata Bay, which wasn't very encouraging. But they landed safely, marched south towards Sevastopol and met the Russian army at the Battle of the Alma, which generally speaking we won. We managed to force the Russians back, and some think we could have walked right into Sevastopol. The Russians pulled a lot of troops out of Sevastopol, and the main Russian army, which often isn't considered where it was, they think we were besieging Sevastopol and the Russians were just there, but the main Russian army was in the centre of the peninsula. And Sevastopol had a strong garrison, and a lot of naval forces because they'd sunk the ships, and they defended the port with marines, some soldiers, a bit of a hodgepodge. So the British and French armies marched to the south of Sevastopol, thinking that was the weaker side, and decided to lay siege to it to weaken it. The remainder of most of the war in this area was the Russians' attempt to get them out, in that you had the battles of Balaclava, Inkerman, and later Chernaya in 1855 to try and dislodge the Allies, but they didn't succeed. British forces were based at supplied via Balaclava. French forces, it's not marked, but it's on the western end of the peninsula at Caucasus Bay and Kamiesh. So technological advances, because it is very important. Steamships, steam locomotives. It was in the big changeover. Some ships were still under sail, but steamships were extremely important. Electric telegraph, that got out there in April 1855 and changed the course of the war, because then you had a lot of government interference with the generals, which didn't go down very well. Extensive use of mass-produced rifles, mainly with the Allies, but the Russians managed to source theirs in return. Prefabricated hospitals, anaesthetics and organised nursing. Well, we all know about Florence Nightingale and the organised nursing, but she wasn't the only one. There were other nursing expeditions went out there. Prefabricated hospitals arrived relatively late in the war and were designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Photography in the war zone, we know about Roger Fenton. He actually wasn't the first photographer out there, but the photographs that were originally taken got sunk on a ship, which sank in a gale, and including the two photographers. There was also, I can't remember his first name is, but I think his name's Robertson or Robinson, took a lot of photographs. War correspondents, most famous of which is William Howard Russell, whose letters to the Times and the Times publication of them caused a scandal and brought down the government of Lord Aberdeen. And an organised mail system for the forces. There had been some organisation before that, but this was the first real attempt to organise system and cooperation. So these are earlier versions of forces mail. The AB is a very rare cancellation, which was put on the envelopes during the War of the Austrian Succession. And this is a letter from my collection of, I think, 1745. Mail from the forces, particularly the private soldiers and also sailors, was organised a bit better by the Postage Act of 1795, which allowed ordinary soldiers and sailors to send mail home for a penny, and providing it was signed by someone acting as their commanding officer. It doesn't necessarily mean a captain or a senior commander. It just means somebody for whom they were in their chain of command. For posting mail in the other direction, you could post at the post office again for a penny, and providing it was sent to a private or a seaman in the armed forces or the navy. Right, back to the Crimean War postal arrangements. I mean, this looks a bit complicated, and it is to some extent. So basically, you had routes from Varna, which is in the Balkans, to Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. When the forces moved to the Crimea, you had ships sailing from the Crimea to Constantinople, and the mail was transferred at Constantinople. There was sometimes a bit of a race between the British and French to get the mail to Constantinople, which the French often won. And also sometimes, because of the clogging up at the port of Balaclava, the British ships also sailed from Kamiesh, and the mail had to be hauled over the not very good roads from Balaclava to Kamiesh. So basically, you then had, when you got to Constantinople, the mail was transferred onto a French packet, which would go via Messina to Marseille, across France to Calais, and then to Dover and to London. An alternative route was for the 1 penny rate, which would go on a British ship whenever. It wasn't a regular packet as the French one was, and that went to Malta. If the ship was going on past Malta, fair enough, but sometimes it could be transshipped at Malta onto another ship, and then that went to Southampton for distribution. Now, there was also routes via Austria, via Trieste. And this will be dealt with to some extent in the next, in part 2, from the Ionian Islands, and also from Turkey itself through Austria to Aachen, and again across Belgium to Britain, to Ostend, and then to Britain. So, and there was also obviously mail in the Baltic, but so we're not covering that at the moment. Postal rates. Now, these are the earlier postal rates. There's greater variety than these, but these are the main ones. We'll ignore the Black Sea Fleet for the moment, but British naval transport in Turkish waters, quarter of an ounce for a shilling, and also from Constantinople for a shilling by a French packet. And mail going out there, as you'll see, was subject to the same cost. It's a shilling to get out to Constantinople. There's a number of letters I can show you there. And it was 1 and 4pence if it was via British packet, 1 and 9pence for over half an ounce, 11pence if it went via Southampton. So some went that route, and I haven't got any 8penny rates via private ship. There was also a method where 2pence, if it went on a private ship, it could go for a certain rate, and I'm not sure whether the 8pence rate includes the 2pence for the captain, but you do get some 5penny rates, and I'm not sure where I haven't got one to show you here, where it was 5pence, and that would be the threepenny concession and 2pence for the captain of a private ship. And then he's got Baltic fleet again via Danzig, but again we'll do that in more detail next time. So concession rates brought in at the end of May 1854. Crimean Black Sea Fleet, quarter ounce, 3pence, that's via France. Soldiers and sailors, quarter ounce a penny, that's queenship or transport, which I've shown you when I showed you the map. For obviously the rates then went up at 6pence for up to half an ounce, and shilling for up to an ounce via France. Baltic fleet was slightly more complicated. They were messing about the rates there. They brought it down to 8pence and 5pence originally, and then it went down to 3pence, I think in July of 1854, if I remember correctly. Again, I'll deal with that. And then the 3pence and a penny rate. So when a rate changed, it was in discussion with the Treasury, because obviously they were balancing quantity delivered and transported via cost. So yeah, it's supply and demand, and so if Treasury approved it, they issued a Treasury warrant for the new rate. This was then posted in the London Gazette, and then it went out to post offices, and then we had a post office notice up in the post office with the new rates. These are from the Postmaster General's report for each year. The first Postmaster General's report that I've seen, and I don't know whether it is the earliest, but the first one I've seen was for 1854. So I was quite pleased to find that. As you can see, the threepenny concession rate, or the full rate if it's for early in the war, 282 for May to December 1854. So it's mainly the concession rate, 282,000 out, 325,000 back. But on the British ships, the 1penny rate, 10,000 out, which I haven't got any examples of, and only 2,500 back. And examples of those are rare. Again, I will show you something of that in the next time. You can see that even more going back in 1855, but there are no figures, I'm afraid, for 1856. So postage at the start of the war. If you remember, I said that one of the rates was 1 and 4pence. So you've got a 10pence and a 6pence on this one. It's gone via France, Calais stamp, and it's going to Gallipoli, which was a little bit down the at the Dardanelles. So it's on the route from the Mediterranean. It was the beginning of the route from the Mediterranean up to the Black Sea. So made more famous in the First World War. And there was a French post office there. There may have been a British post office as well. There was some cooperation, but it's not absolutely certain. There was some transshipment of mail at Gallipoli as well as Constantinople. But that's the 1 and 4pence rate, very early in the war. in April, I think, 54. This is a French packet. Now, this is a 1 threepence, again from Gallipoli. So it's not exactly the same rate. I think it's on mail coming from Alexandria to Gallipoli, picking up at Gallipoli and then going on to Marseille. Again, very, very early in the war. So here's some other, this is quite important. This is a 1 and a penny rate from Malta. And again, the routes could cause some confusion, and they were different, as I'm sure you'll be familiar. If it goes by a different route or a different ship, it'll be different amounts of money. There is also this would have been by a French packet. British packet, I think, was 11 pence, although Winston might correct me, and Winston's also told me about a 6-penny rate, which I've never seen, so it may not be it may be very rare. I haven't seen that. The one on the right hand side is going out to Constantinople, shilling rate, again early in the war, but it's obviously clearly to somebody in the forces, so again it's before the concession rate. And you got May, it's quite late in May for the concession, just before the concession rates came in, and that's May 27th, 1854. Now I like to show this as an example of how looking at the letters and not just the envelopes can really bring out information and link things. I got this first letter from a dealer, 1 9pence. He thought it related to Peking or piping. I'm not so sure of that. It could be pressing or something similar. But anyway, it's from Midshipman Edmund Hay on board the Britannia on board the HMS Britannia, and he's writing to his father, Rear Admiral Hay. Must have been a heavy envelope because it's 1 and 9pence rate. But I didn't know that it was, I couldn't prove that it was Crimean War related until I got the second envelope, which actually contained a letter off Odessa, April 24th, 1854, sent at 11pence rate. And I could then link them up because I knew that one was definitely a Crimean War letter. So that one, I was really pleased to bring that one into my Crimean War collection. So it's always worth looking at the letters, looking at other things, but you may not even have them in your collection, but the exploration, and that's part of the fun to me, it really brings it to life. And it's not just on the rates. So they were, because of the costs, what was happening was that a lot of people, or those in influence and those with influential friends who were going back to Britain, gave them letters, probably a group of letters, not just one. They'd probably write all the letters, give it to them as they were going back to the UK, either on leave or wounded, and then they'd post them in London, and it's get charged tuppence, with a penny, with no stamp and a penalty. And this went right up the scale because the moment. This was a letter from John Montague Burgoyne of the Grenadier Guards to his wife. Now, it's important that although he's of the Grenadier Guards, I think he was also a senior engineer, so it's quite obviously somebody with a fair amount of money, but he still decided the postage was too much. So there was a great deal of pressure on the post office to reduce the rates and the amounts of, particularly for officers who did a lot of the writing or most of the writing. That was the penny rate for soldiers, but that was as and when. Now, in the meantime, the post office, because there was also a big problem at the French post office in Constantinople, in that British mail was piling up at the French post office in Constantinople, and it wasn't being collected. and it wasn't being collected. I know some of it was unstamped mail, so the French wanted to collect their share of the postage on it, and it was just left there. So the British government sent two postmasters out there to try and sort things out. If you look, they were Edward Smith and Thomas Angel, and they also took some councillors out with them. And this is probably one of the early. Smith went to Constantinople. He was the senior, and he sent Thomas Angel on to establish a post office at Varna in the Balkans, because the British Army hadn't gone to the Crimea yet. And this is probably he arrived there on the 20th of June, 1854. This letter is dated June the 25th, 1854. And that's probably one of the earliest ones to have the British Army Post Office cancellation from the army in the east. Now, interestingly enough, although concession rates were in by that time, or should have been, it's charged at 11p. Whether it's because the rates hadn't been defined for Varna, I'm not sure. Again, it possibly needs further research. So we had an agreement with the French. This and a letter to Smith is probably the only things that's not in my collection. That one is the letter and the agreement between the French and British governments. As you can see with the patriotic envelope, we were getting on. Okay. Occasionally, Lord Raglan, who'd fought at Waterloo with the Duke of Wellington, he was the British commander. He sometimes got the Russians and the French mixed up, which didn't often go down too well. But generally speaking, he got on well with the French commanders. So we're back to this. Oh, this is the other thing that's not in my collection. This is the Postmaster General's, a very long letter to appointing Mr. Smith as senior postmaster and telling him what he can do and what he can't do. They took some stamps out with them. I think pennies, and they may have taken sixpences out with them. I'd have to check the letter. I think they took pennies and sixpences. May have taken tuppences as well. I'll have to check that, I'm afraid. And this is but I haven't got a smoke photograph of Mr. Smith. I've got a photograph of Mr. Angel. So I think Mr. Angel there, you can see he's a flamboyant character, and I think it's possibly outside the post office. If you see a view of the post office at Balaclava, you make your own guesses. And he seems to have done most of the liaising. Letters that you get are either from Mr. Angel or later on Henry Mellersh, who was another postmaster that was sent out to help, along with some postal sorters. Problem is that they had Turkish postal sorters, but it didn't really work. So they had to send. They then got some soldiers in to do it and clear the backlog from the French post office, but that didn't really work. So they eventually sent a further postmaster with some sorters out to Constantinople and to the Crimea. So where were the post offices? Well, there was possibly one at British post offices, that is. There's possibly one at Gallipoli. We're not absolutely certain. Constantinople, Varna, but that didn't do much after they moved to the Crimea, although there was a telegraph station kept on there, and Balaclava. So at Constantinople, the post office originally was at Galata. Well, that proved inadequate for a number of reasons, including fairly chaotic, and I don't think there was enough room for the amount of mail. And the French but there was a house next door to the French post office, which was at Pera. And the person who owned that house wanted an extortionate rate at the time. So I think it was like £250 a month. Well, in 1854 terms, that's ridiculous. But it was even worse when the British found that the French were getting their house a lot cheaper. So the French said, well, appeal to the Turkish government, which the British government did, and so they got their house at Pera at a cut rate. Later on, well, I think the same as the French. Later on, the there was a hospital opened at Scutari for the purposes of sorry, there was a post office opened at Scutari for purposes of the hospital. And mail from Scutari that's gone via the post office there is scarce. Oh, sorry, wait a moment. And I'll talk about that later. Here, I think these are both from the Illustrated London News. The view on the left is, I think, the post office at Galata. As you can see, it's organised chaos with stuff on the floor. I like the fact that there's a postal notice. So, so it's accurate enough. It's even got the postal notice up on the left-hand side there. So it's got people demanding letters and such like, and which was a big problem, because that's one of the big complaints that officers sent soldiers to collect the letters for the regiment, and they'd either already gone or they hadn't been sorted. So again, it started to get better, but was not perfect by any means. The view on the right-hand side, also from the Illustrated London News, are the two post offices, the French post office and the British post office. Interesting, they say the English and French post offices. Well, it was the British Army at Pera. This is the post office at Balaclava. I'm not sure when it was taken. It's looking a bit decrepit, though when you see that photograph of Mr. Angel outside the door, it was possibly like that, or not much different. So that was out in the Crimea, as you can see. Sebastopol, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, but the Sebastopol was just to the north, that inlet. The main dockyards, which is why they attacked from the south, were on the south side of the inlet. The French port was over at Kamiesh, which I will mark in future, on the on the western side. So the main post office, as I said, was at Balaclava, but towards the end of 1854, Lord Raglan and his headquarters staff began, let's just say, strongly requesting a post office at headquarters, that the Balaclava post office move up to Kadikoy on the plain outside Sevastopol, so that the headquarters could have the main post office. Now, Thomas Angel was quite strong-willed himself, and there was a bit of a tussle around the end of 1854, and eventually the post office at Balaclava stayed where it was, but an additional post office was established at Lord Raglan's headquarters at Kadikoy. You can see that this diagram of Lord Raglan's headquarters gives the post office. It also gives the electric telegraph office, so it must be after April 1855, because that's when the telegraph got out there. I'm not sure what Mr. Beattie did, but anyway, that was his hut, and Lord Raglan was over at his headquarters house in an old farmhouse that's on the top left. So we had two post offices in the Crimea itself. So what was on the envelopes? I want to just catch myself up. Bear with me a second. Right. So there was a big problem in that we've got civilian rates, which stayed the same as before the war, and military rates, which we had the concession. And these are civilian rates. The first one is, again, shilling rate going out to Constantinople, but it's to HM Transport, Lord Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie was incidentally Viceroy of India Governor General of India at the time. And the fact that it's to a transport illustrates a bit of a fuss was being made by sailors on the transport ships, where the soldiers that they were carrying could send a letter at a discounted rate, but they had to pay the full rate, even though they were in the service of the government. And there was a bit of a hoorah over this. And eventually, in, I think, early 1855, the postal authorities caved in and said that transports could also use the concession rate provided they were employed on government service. The letter on the right-hand side is another one from Malta, and you'd expect it to have a concession rate because August 1854 the concessions rate was in. But the answer is it didn't. It's still at what? It's still at the 1 and a penny rate. And Malta never ever got the concession rate. It was always full price to and from Malta. Again, that did cause ructions, but it didn't occur. It stayed at the full rates apart from the seaman's penny rate. Seaman and soldier's penny rate. Here are the obliterators and postmarks, or some of them. This is in the copybooks. This one is what we call the star and ciphers, or what's more colloquially known as the OXO cancellation, and that was proved in February 1855, and went out to the Crimea with I think it was with Henry Mellersh when he went out in March 1855. So there was some also, you'll see other postmarks as well, but I've used this opportunity that right at the end of the war, they expected it to go on into 1856, 1857. But as I said, on December 1855, they introduced some new postmarks. And they were originally used on money orders. Again, we'll mention this on part 2. Apart from and they're not on Crimean War mail, apart from the last one, which is Constantinople. And that is, as far as I know, on 3 items of post using mid-1856. Very pricey. I have seen one come up at auction about 4 or 5 years back, but it is very rare. The other main mark, so bear in mind that these are marks used and cancelled in the Crimea as obliterators in the Crimea, along with the British Army Post Office cancellation on the rear. So the obliterations are the crown and ciphers used from July 1854 to July 1855. They're rather poor, as you can see on the letter below, which also has some penny stars, which are quite worn plates. I personally, and I have no evidence to prove it, think that this was a headquarters stamp, but I don't know, and I haven't got any evidence for that. It's just a gut feeling. The star between ciphers, it was used, again, as you've seen it was in the proof books, and it was taken out March 1855 to July 1856. And that was, I think it may have been at Constantinople, but again, I have no evidence to prove it, other than that all the Scutari mail that's got adhesives on has that cancellation. This particular one is interesting. Is that this was sent by someone was serving in the German Legion to an instrument maker, a musical instrument maker in London in late 1855. Basically, due to cholera and battle losses, Britain was desperately short of troops, and we started recruiting in the USA, but more especially in Europe, and we created German, Italian and Swiss legions. The only one that really got off the ground was the German Legion, and that was the only one that really got out to the Crimea, the east, where it stayed in Turkey at Kadikoy, which is down near Scutari. And so it's quite rare and quite desirable for that reason. basically, when the war finished, they didn't want to do with the Germans because the various governments in Germany wouldn't accept them back, so they sent them to South Africa and some of them later fought in India. So here we are with the British Army Post Office. The earliest one in use from June 1854. As you saw, there was I have a June 25th, 1854. Was type 1. There's variations of that. That one's got a line, but there's also occurs with dots, and I think there's a number of sizes as well, different sizes. When the Crown and the Oxo cancellation went out, it's possible that the type 2s A and C went out for Constantinople and Scutari Hospital. Type 2 code B, Balaclava, it's got December 1854, but I don't think it was used that much by that time for a reason I'll explain. So these are mainly from March 1855 onwards. And as you can see, type A was Constantinople, B was Balaclava, and C was Scutari Hospital. But the code C is reversed. Why they did that, I don't know. Whether it was to stop people confusing it with Constantinople, or it was just to make it fairly obvious it was from Scutari, or it was the only available mark. I can't say on that. Again, more research is needed. Colours. I'm colourblind, I'm afraid, so it makes it hard sometimes for me. But without code letter, number of colours, as you can see, blue, black and green. I think mainly to me is black and blue. There's not. I will show you green later, but greens tend to be thought of as headquarters. Code A, red, blue, or blue, green. Constantinople. I've got quite a number in red. It's quite common in red. Code B, Balaclava, black, blue, or green, or green, as you can see. And Scutari Hospital is usually in blue, green. Scutari Hospital is rare. So far, I've tracked down 30 odd covers. There may be more, but obviously, that's all I've found so far. And it commands a premium. So what we've got to say now is that the general mail from Turkey, rather than those with the cancellations that were made out in Turkey, most mail from Turkey and the Crimea was postmarked with the British Army Post Office, but then it was put into sealed bags and sent to London. Unusually, the soldiers were allowed to send it unpaid at this effectively concession rate, and it didn't attract a penalty when it had payment on delivery. There was no penalty for being unpaid. So the person receiving it just had to pay the threepence. The letter on the left-hand side is to a Mrs. Marks. Now, Mrs. Marks, and it's been written by a lady called Fanny Duberly. If you go on Amazon and look up Fanny Duberly, she wrote a diary and a journal and letters to her sister and other people and brother-in-law. And she claims that she was the only officer's lady that stayed throughout the war from 1854 to 1856, and she was married to the paymaster of the 8th Hussars. And he always has a long-suffering look. But yeah, she wrote quite a lot about the war and was fairly close to some of the fighting. The one on the right is interesting because it's got a fancy 3. Now, rumour has it that this was used when Mr. Smith in Constantinople was ill, and so it doesn't. The letters with the fancy 3 normally do not have the British Army Post Office marked. They were used between, generally speaking, they were used between. We think the fancy 3 was put on in London, and generally speaking, they were used between late 1854 and March 1855. So I have seen one other letter, and it's appeared that's non-Crimea with this fancy tree, and it's appeared on mail from Liverpool to Australia, and it was featured in an article in the London Philatelist about 2 or 3 years ago. That's the only time I've seen this fancy tree used elsewhere. Others might know different, but if so, I'd like to know. Someone I know also has a fancy tree that was used in it as late as June 1855 on a letter. So that's quite unusual. So this is the unstamped mail. Just to illustrate about the three, this is forwarded unstamped mail. So you've got the three crossed out, and because it's not being delivered, they've had a so it's presumably been refused at the address. So the postman has added the post office has added it, upgraded it to 4p. But just to make sure it was clear, some local post offices added their own local stamp. I think this is St Albans, if I remember correctly. And it's first postage not paid, just to emphasise that it's the 4p that's got to be paid. So that, and the reason for the 4p on the envelope. So that's quite a scarce cancellation, but it's to give the postman a reason as to why they're charging 4p. Right, this is mail with adhesives on them, and this is because you're going to see some fairly scarce stuff after this. This is what you usually get. This is Crimean mail is rare, but Crimean mail is rare. But these are the most common items. They were sent in a sealed bag from Constantinople to London, owned by the post office in London, and then cancelled in London for delivery in the UK. The photograph at the lower left is actually from a registered envelope, but it was given as a unique. Now, nothing's necessarily ever unique, but it may be British Army Post Office bag seal of the period. So this was what was on the bags that went from Constantinople to London. As you can see, you've got the threepence rates, and there's a threepence rate there by a penny and twopence. The first letter on the left has been ingenuinely advertised by some dealers as being by William Howard Russell, but it's actually not. It's actually not William Howard Russell, the correspondent, but it's by Major Charles Russell, who won the VC at the Battle of Inkerman. And this is sent to his cousin, Charles Russell, who, and when he sent it, it actually never reached him because his cousin went and committed suicide in London just before the letter reached London. The second envelope is to Lieutenant Colonel Cox. This is a huge correspondence, and mainly the letters out to Colonel Cox from his family, but there are occasionally I think 2 or 3 letters that's for coming back. So the amount of mail arriving in London was such that the post office started the clerks were getting worn out. So the first time they enlarged the councillors to double, which is 46 and 47. And then they went for a triple councillor, which are 48 and 49. So I've illustrated 49. And the cover illustrated is very unusual, apart from having 14 1p stamps on it. It's actually got councillor with the 48 councillor, and it's going out to the Crimea, which is quite unusual. Again, somebody got so many stamps to stamp, they may as well get the triple councillor. but it's more usual for the mail from the Crimea to have these cancellations. And these are forwarded stamp mail. The first one has not been charged any extra. It's gone out to Captain, not quite read his surname, but he left the Crimea and gone back to Woolwich. So it's circulated in the British Army system, and it's gone back, and he's not been charged any extra. On the other hand, this is some unstamped mail that's been delivered, and then the person's forwarded it on and added a penny stamp. That's on the right-hand side. The one in the middle is quite unusual in that it's got a rare OXO cancellation and has then been forwarded on with an additional penny stamp. So it's an OXO cancellation and an ordinary cancellation. Also unusual about this one is that whereas often these letters had wax seals or they were just stuck down, this person sealed it with a bit of the edge from the sheet with the instruction on it above the address and to the right, and the usual instructions. This is forwarded stamp mail. And I like this. This one's quite poignant because it's gone to Britain on the threepenny rate, and then it's been forwarded on to Paris with an 8 decimes stamped cancellation. That's done. It's not written. That is with a stamp, and very poignantly received in Paris. 20th of August 1854, the last. So one presumes that the gentleman sending it I assume it's a gentleman, had died. The cover on the right hand side is a bit. I call it the Holy Grail. One of the Holy Grails of the Crimean War is to find a stamp with a Fortman's surface printed cancellation. Sorry, a Fortman's surface printed adhesive on it, because there was no reason to have a Fortman stamp out there because the rates were generally in multiples of threepence. So I did finally get one on a letter from the Crimea, but it's a little bit of a cheat. The letter itself, which is, again, this is a good reason for having letters in the envelopes and exploring them. It actually says that the letter was sent by, I've sent it by, I can't remember what the person's name was, to London, and then it had to get it's been posted with a penny rate on, and the post office thought it was a Crimean War letter because it says Crimea at the bottom corner. So surcharged it 2p, realised it wasn't, so scribbled that out, and then somebody stuck a Fortney rate on to send it to France upside down. It's possibly the postman thought that stamp was a penny. So if it's been posted without stamp or with the Fortney stamp on it, and originally charged it 2p, so it was a mistake. So I found that really interesting, though I've never yet seen a Fortney stamp from the Crimea itself. Well, we're in a area of change at the moment because, all right, perforated stamps were coming in from the early 1850s, but some people still had the imperforate stamps. I mean, they weren't sent out to the Crimea, so they must have taken them with them. And this first one is quite rare in that it's the imperforated stamps used with a reasonably decent crown and stars as late as December 10th, 1854. The one on the right is a mixed franking, so you've got a standard penny stamp, penny stars, along with a tuppence imperforate stamp, cancelled with an octo cancellation. It's from the sleigh what they call the sleigh correspondence. Again, it's a number of letters that's sent to Miss Sleigh. So again, that is not only rare because it's a mixed franking, but it's rare. It's even rarer because it's got the octo cancellation. Embossed issues. Well, embossed issues were in during Crimean War. The shilling and tenpence have been in for a while, and the sixpence was introduced in March. So this is a 11pence rate out to Malta using a 10penny embossed and a penny stars. We know that this gentleman was going out to the Crimea because I have other letters from him that's actually in the Crimea itself. You can see it's via Marseille. So I'm not sure if that was the French packet. Maybe the one and a penny rate was via the British packet. Winston perhaps told me at the end. And so that's an 11pence rate gone out there. Challenge for you no more than me. I've not worked out how this letter on the right, how they worked out the rate. So you've got basically a 1 and 7pence rate, and I'm not sure how they came to a 1 and 7pence rate. It's quite late in the war. It's 1856. It's sent to the Honourable George Eliot, who was, although it doesn't say a military, he was military, but it doesn't say that. Odo Russell was at the British Embassy, and Odo Russell was the son of the Prime Minister, Lord John Russell. He wasn't Prime Minister during the Crimean War, but he'd been Prime Minister before the Crimean War in the 1840s, and he was Prime Minister after the Crimean War in the 1850s and 1860s. So somebody quite influential. But again, to the British, you'd think it'd be a government rate going out to the British Embassy, but no, it wasn't. And I'm not sure, as I said, I've still not worked out how that rate was worked out. Again, another unusual item that the post office didn't really know what to do with is penny pink envelopes. Again, they weren't issued, so somebody must have taken them out there to post back. First one is that the post office has decided to treat it as civilian mail. And so although it's sent at the concession rate of threepence, the post office decided it's civilian mail, so they've charged it a shilling. You've got a 9penny surcharge. At least they've counted the penny pink envelope as a penny, I suppose. And so the person had to pay a shilling when they received it. The second one on the right-hand side is that they have acknowledged it as Crimean War related, possibly because it's got the octo cancellation. So they've accepted it as a concession rate there. Again, there's the octo cancellation. It is rare. Well, it's rare in any case. So heavier letters, as I said, there was threepence, sixpence, and then a shilling for an ounce for over. And these are between quarter ounce and half an ounce. Yeah, sorry, shilling would be half an ounce or over. And the first one's sent out by Lieutenant Colonel Cox. Sorry, to Lieutenant Colonel Cox. I like that one because it's a penny pink that was used going out to the Crimean War, to the Crimea. And you've got a multiplicity of different, you've got threepences and a tuppeny stamp to make up the rate. The one on the right is quite scarce in that it's, again, an octo cancellation. It's making this sound very common, but they're not. And it's a 6penny rate back to the UK. I love this letter. It's one of my favourites. It's actually cancelled and before it was actually officially posted. What it is probably one of the earliest letters from the Crimea. It shows a headquarters. It shows the British Army Post Office in green. Even I can see that it's green. So again, it may be from headquarters staff. And it's an entire, so it's got the letter with it. And the letter is September 16th, 1854. So literally just 2 days after the fleet arrived. And the post officers were on board various ships because they didn't know what to do with the post office. It was on the Sovereign, then the Ganges, and they also needed to find a ship where they could sort all the buckets of letters that they got with them, because everybody wanted to send letters back saying they got just landed in the Crimea, and so they needed sorting. Also, letters for troops that had landed, which had been picked up at Varna or come from Constantinople, again needed to be distributed. So it was fairly chaotic. So this letter was written September 16th, 1854, but the cancellation is December 10th, 1854. So it actually was cancelled before it was sent officially, but it's probably one of the earliest letters from the Crimea. And that's your lot.
Well, Mark, have we got any questions in the chat?
I don't believe we have, actually.
Oh.
That's right, isn't it, Mike? We haven't, yeah? I can't see any, Mike. Yeah, I'm having a quick look at it. So, Simon, to answer your question, I don't think we have any questions in the chat.
We've got one question from Mark Oxley.
Yes, Mark.
I have a question.
Mark.
Yes, I have a question. I've got a cover, and it says "Off to Nados," sent in September 1853 via Malta. So am I right in thinking that was part of the British fleet? It was sent to London.
I think so. Yes, the basically in 1853, the main British fleet was based at Malta, and they moved it up in when things got threatening. They moved it up into the Dardanelles in late 1853, and especially when Turkey gone and declared war. And when the Turkish fleet got sunk, they then moved it up to Constantinople, and I think they actually sent it out into the Black Sea. That's both the British and French fleets, so to deter the Russians from doing anything more than they'd already done. And
but it hasn't, as I say, would it have gone in a naval bag to Malta and then off to London from there?
I would think so. Yes. What rate's on it? How much?
1 and a penny.
Well, that's it. That's from Malta. That's the Malta rate. If you see, I've shown 2 Malta rates at 1 and a penny, both just at the beginning of the war and just from at the end with it on the war. The Malta rate didn't change. It was 1 and a penny. Yeah. Perhaps Winston. I hope you don't mind me asking. Was that the British packet, the 1 and a penny?
The French packet was 1 and a penny. The British was 11 pence.
That's it. That's got the 2 rates. It's the way, which way around. Thank you very much, Winston.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's gone via the French packet, so presumed to Marseille and then across France. Although it wouldn't have been as quick as it was later, because they were still building the line to Marseille across France, and they hadn't actually got it completed when the war started. So obviously there was a big rush to get it completed.
Yeah, it took 3 weeks from Malta to London.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, it speeded it up to about 10 or 12 days.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. On your manuscript mail, as far as I could see, they're all written in black ink. I'm assuming the normal convention was used. Does that mean that they were all unpaid?
The ones without stamps were unpaid, except on receipt.
Right. Well, that would be why they're in black. Yes, indeed. Was there no facility to collect the money out there? Is that why?
Well, it had to be paid via adhesives. So I think they'd only taken a certain number of adhesives out with them. I can find you how many
No, that's fine. That explains and it would also explain why your fourpenny, the penny redirected rate, the threepence plus the penny, was it why he was looking for the fourpence, because the threepence obviously wasn't prepaid, so he was looking for the fourpence to collect on. Yeah, okay. Because and your fancy 3, I think, was probably cancelled in Liverpool. You saw it in the LP in an article by Colin Talbot with a letter going out to New South Wales.
That's the one. That's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I took a scan of it, but that's the only one I've seen.
Yeah. And I don't think Colin knows what it was for. He thinks it's probably a type of accountancy mark, but I don't think it was undertaken during the accountancy period. So it must have been a general cancel that Liverpool had or that type. I think he says it's normally associated with Liverpool, and they must have just used it for a threepenny rate going out, I guess.
Right, now that's interesting, but I'm fairly sure that there were very little mail came in from the Crimea, but it's nobody's mentioned Liverpool. If you could put me, is it Colin? If somebody could put me in touch with him, I'd be interested to take that forward. Because
I can do that, certainly. It was in June 2022 LP.
Yeah, that's right. I'd only just joined. And I thought, oh, it's a Crimea.
No. It was probably from Liverpool out to New South Wales to Sydney.
So if that, I mean, the point is, if that is applied in Liverpool rather than London,
it looks like it.
That means Liverpool was as a port,
yes,
for receipt of Crimean mail during that period.
Well, have a look.
It surprises me, but it surprises me as nobody's highlighted that. I have got one where a ship docked at Southampton and then sailed round to Liverpool.
Yeah.
But
the mail would have been offloaded at Southampton if that.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So I'd certainly be interested if somebody could put me in touch.
Yeah, and he's very good. He'll respond to you. I think he's got a few problems with his eyes at the moment, but
I know that. I mean, I've got a cataract myself, so
anyway, thank you.
He's coming to SPH tomorrow.
Sorry,
is he?
He's coming to the SPH meeting tomorrow. So I think we're presenting him with his medal. He won a FEPA medal for his postal history research.
Oh wow!
So that's being presented tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Possibly, Mark, we ought to perhaps draw the formal part of the close. I should thank you, Adrian, for the presentation and move on to the certificate. And then we can stay on and chat a bit longer. Anyway, Adrian, thank you. It's clearly a fascinating story. Lots of different rates in there. I shall look forward to finding out what's happening next time with the rest of it. Wondering whether you're covering the Sardinian contingent and what they did.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, all kinds of fascinations with the Crimean War. I mean, one of the other impacts it had, of course, was to take steamships off other routes.
That's correct.
The Australian collector, the Clipper mails came back in, and we had some absolutely wonderful sailings to Australia because the steamships were stuck with the Crimean War.
Right.
You're right to identify this period in the 1850s as one of enormous development with the steams here, particularly with the ships, elsewhere with the rail, the telegraphs coming in. War correspondence, as you mentioned, and indeed rather better weaponry, which perhaps people should have taken notice of some of the future conflicts. But it's been a fascinating story. I'd love to pick up with you about that AB mark. Actually, that looked a really interesting one too, from a much earlier period.
You're welcome. Yes, certainly.
Yeah. So thank you very much indeed for entertaining us at the start of the season. And Mark, if you've got the certificate, hopefully we can present it. This will actually be posted out to you. You will receive a tangible copy.
Thank you.
But the president has signed it off. We'll probably all be very glad to know his operation seems to have gone well. So the real physical thing will be in the post. So thank you very much for that. So if we draw the formal part to the close, we can then sort of have more informal questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay on.